I know that everybody wants to hear about the transfer portal, but it is early signing day. This is a primer for who Ole Miss is going to bring in and why Ole Miss has a top 5 defensive line class out of high school this year. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Also did a little stint at WSMV in Nashville. Today on the show, it is early signing day, and Ole Miss has a top 5 defensive line class committed. We talk about that and the future of high school recruiting itself as the show goes on. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, it's early signing day, and I do realize that transfer portal fever is gripping the Ole Miss fan base as we speak at the moment. But I think we need to at least take today to give the high school players their due. Today is their day. And, you know, you look at what's going on, and everybody's been talking about Princely and Monmielen, and we have potentially Tyler Barron, that defensive line group, and the work that Ole Miss has done on that side of the ball in the transfer portal. I think it's also important to think about the fact that Ole Miss has a top 5 defensive line class at the high school level. If we look at rankings right now, Ole Miss's high school class, even though they only have 21 commits, they're sitting firmly in the top 20. They have 11 4-star athletes and 9 3-star athletes. For those that believe in the blue chip ratio, that tells you right there that they are well over 50% blue chips in this high school class. That's not including transfer portal, where Ole Miss is loading up on 4- and 5-star players. This is called a talent infusion. Big-time players, and it's led by that defensive line class. And this is from 24/7 Sports. It has William Eccles as the number 1 player in the class and lists him as an interior offensive lineman. He is not being recruited to Ole Miss as an interior offensive lineman. He's being recruited as an interior defensive lineman. And Art Kehoe, whenever he was at Ole Miss back in the mid-2000s, talked about the best player to come over and play like guard and in the interior offensive line are people that are really good defensively because they have the feet to do it. Their mobility and their athleticism allows it to happen. So that's why William Eccles, whenever he's being ranked, it's interchangeable. But I've been told, and everybody's been told, that he's been recruited as a defensive player. Good player. He just got a bump on 24/7. He is now the number 1 player on Ole Miss's list. Kamarion Franklin, number 2, everybody that saw him in the Miss Al All-Star game knows that he was absolutely a monster. Jeffrey Rush, who's quietly been a ringleader in this class. I don't want to compare him to Dante Moncrief, but he was in Oxford a whole bunch of times. And then you have Cameron Beavers from Bay Springs. And heck, my brother-in-law lives down there. My sister lives in Bay Springs. I know pretty much a good deal of what's going on with Cameron Beavers. But those 4 players, they're all 4-star athletes, and they are lined up and queued up to get on the defensive line for the Ole Miss Rebels. I'm pretty excited about what the defensive line will look like for Ole Miss as this goes on. There's other players that Ole Miss has brought in as well that should be quite interesting. I shut the page down real quick. Give me just a second. But you have, for instance, Andy Jaffe. And everybody's like, what? Andy Jaffe, he's at the bottom of our commitment list on some sites. And yes, Andy Jaffe is the type of athlete that you look up, if he'd have went to Wake Forest by the time he's a junior, he was an all ACC player. Andy Jaffe is a super athlete at the highest level, and he has a chance to be very good. The two bottom commits in this class, Andy Jaffe and Shamaar Darden, are two players that I am really looking at right now. Darden was an alpha on that Tupelo defense. They were very good defensively, and because of his work, they were even a little bit more dominant. The reason I bring him up is he is the player in this class that has Mike Hilton potential. Everybody remembers that as well. Couple of players that popped on: Dylan Hipp at tight end, John Wayne Oliver out of CPA at offensive line is a big pickup as well. Raymond Collins, the number one JUCO linebacker, is being recruited as well. Marquise Willis, great last name, good receiver. He's Malik Willis's brother. Travaris Banks, who is going to the Under Armour All-American game. Anthony Robinson from Destrehan, an athlete. Anthony Maddox, the quarterback that we've talked about a couple of times out of Oak Grove. Noreel White, Deion Smith. This class has a chance to be pretty good for Ole Miss as it is situated. I'm not expecting a whole lot of drama for what goes, but I am expecting a little bit of drama. And I'm going to give you like three names in the next segment of players that I am looking at. But I'm, like I said, Shamaar Darden and Andy Jaffe. It's weird that people are looking at the lowest ranked team players on the list, but those are the two players that intrigues me most of all. I like John Wayne Oliver a lot. I like Travaris Banks a lot. And the defensive line class, I've talked about them almost ad nauseum for the last 12 months. Heck, in January, whenever I was still talking to John Garcia instead of Brian Smith, I was like, hey, Ole Miss is going to get one of Kamarion Franklin and the kid that's at Auburn. I forgot his name. Waller. And Ole Miss a little below got Kamarion Franklin. And Kamarion Franklin literally, I think, came to every home football game this season. You want to talk about somebody that was done and was locked up, and you say that's not possible anymore. That doesn't happen anymore. Well, this is a player that it did. And Ole Miss getting Kamarion Franklin is a big step. He worked the Mississippi-Alabama All-Star game. I think he had a couple sacks in there. Just a complete man. And they had him playing a good bit of three technique in that game, instead of playing on the outside. And I'm real curious to see once he gets down to the Under Armour All-American game, which he's going down there as well, if he is going to play inside or on the edge. Is Ole Miss getting a really good three technique that might be the heir apparent for J.J. Pegues, or are they getting an edge that might be the heir apparent for Jared Ivey or Princely Immanuel or Tyler Barrett? That is something I'm going to be interested in, especially whenever I'm watching Under Armour All-American game practices. By the way, we are at about 5,800 subscribers right now on YouTube. Please subscribe to the podcast. Once we get to 6,000, we're going to start doing remote broadcast to where I'm doing the show from another location other than the palatial Central Florida studio. And the first one we're planning on, if we can get before the Under Armour game that happens, I'm planning on doing a show from the Under Armour game. So you can see, not the Under Armour game, the practices. So Wide World of Sports, I'll come live from there, from the facility, and talk about all the stuff that I saw and try and pull that off. And we'll see exactly how that works for everyone that is watching the show as well. So thank you very much for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. So who are the prospects that we should be watching today? These are the flip candidates coming up next. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options that includes spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season today. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So we talked about the class as it is constructed in the first segment and the things that are strengths and the things that are intriguing to me and stuff like that. Well, where's the drama going to come from on signing day? Every signing day, there is drama. And these are probably three names that you should watch. So we'll start off with this list right here because I do think these two are kind of adjoined. I think Noreel White is a candidate for a flip out from Ole Miss. He's committed to Ole Miss, but he has done weird stuff on social media, and he is at best unpredictable right now. He is a guy that I would at least keep an eye on. He's committed, like I said, he's committed to Ole Miss, but for whatever reason, he dropped two decommitted bracket edits on Twitter the other night. He's somebody that I think Ole Miss should have low confidence in at the moment. But we'll see exactly what happens. Maybe Lane Kiffin keeps him. Maybe it allows him to get this other player, because I do think it seems like these two players are going to be coming to the same location, and that's Burnside, who right now is kind of crystal ball projected to Mississippi State. During the Miss Al All-Star game, there were players all over the place posting that Burnside, when he came in with an Ole Miss backpack. He played in Ole Miss gloves. I think Stonka wants to be in Oxford. I think that is his choice. But here is my problem that I have with Stonka, okay? I don't think Mississippi State can allow another A.J. Brown to happen. And I'm not saying that necessarily he'll be A.J. Brown, but that is what the Mississippi State people have to worry about. I think they're going to do whatever it takes to get him, and we'll see exactly how that goes. Really good wide receiver. He is the receiver actually in the Miss Al game that played in the slot as opposed to Noreel White playing outside. I do not know if that has anything to do with the coaches that were going on at the Miss Al game, but that was real interesting with positional senses. Noreel White, in my opinion, has a body that is tailor-made to be a slot wide receiver, yet they insist on lining him up wide. Why is that is the question that I have. I think it is possible to see. It would not surprise me at all if Noreel White ended up at Mississippi State. It wouldn't surprise me if Noreel White ended up at Ole Miss, and that Braylon Burnside ended up at State. Braylon Burnside ended up at Ole Miss. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. I think these two might be a little bit tied. They might not. They could all be playing games for everybody's benefit. And I do recommend that everybody just does not play these games. I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about the fans. Just let them do whatever they're doing and not necessarily worry about it. And we'll talk about that why in just a second. But this is a situation where Burnside is announcing his signature on January 3rd at the Under Armour All-American game. So if these two prospects are tied, I think everybody will get at least a clue. I do not think that Ole Miss is getting Burnside, for instance, if Noreel White ends up at Mississippi State. I think those two, for whatever reason, they might be going together. That's the reason I put them up here. I don't think it's a package deal necessarily. I just think they might end up in the same place. And when you look at wide receivers at Ole Miss is going to have the best wide receiver room in the country. Period. It's not going to be particularly close. And when you notice that, other coaches, and Jeff Lebby sees that as well, is just pumping playing time on these kids over and over and over again. And that is Mississippi State's avenue to winning. This isn't a negative recruiting thing. I don't even think this is an NIL thing. I think this is an early playing time type play for Mississippi State. Because if you look at it, Aiden Williams, I think, is better than any receiver that's coming out in this year's class. I think Aiden Williams was amazing. Aiden Williams in the Under Armour All-American game not only looked like he belonged, but he looked like an upper echelon player at the Under Armour All-American game. Aiden Williams is probably looking at fifth wide receiver on Ole Miss's roster this year. And because of that, there's the reality that's setting in for these young guys that are not patient. They're not going to a school because of the name on the front of the jersey. They're going to find the best situation for them to get ready for the NFL. And who could blame them? I think it's going to be really easy for Jeff Lebby to recruit playing time to these receivers. It's not NIL necessarily. It's not anything like that. It's about, hey, you can come here and do something pretty great. That would be the way that Mississippi State wins and gets both of these. If both of these go to Ole Miss, it's because they just want to play in the playoff and be a part of the top NCAA passing receiving unit out there and to compete. Noreel White and Braylon Burnside going against like Caden Lee and getting ready for 2025 and 2026 to where they can make an impact. I mean, there's arguments that can be made for both there. Now, also, one player that we need to watch for is PJ Woodland from Oak Grove High School. He's committed to LSU at the moment. He is out of Oak Grove. He goes to school with Anthony Maddox, and there's starting to be rumblings over and over and over again about this prospect and where it sits. LSU, I think, wants him. They want him really bad. It's going to be a fight. PJ Woodland did not visit, and it's generally a rule, follow the visits whenever you're dealing with recruiting. But PJ has been on Oxford's campus numerous times, and they've met all the players involved. So I don't know if it is completely set up as well. But PJ Woodland is a prospect that could be the surprise player on Ole Miss's signing day board. Like I said, Ole Miss has 11 four-star players, 9 3-star players on their list. Their transfer portal, we all know exactly what they're doing in the transfer portal right now. But this is all very, very important stuff for Ole Miss football. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. There's 20, 21 kids that are high school in this potential Ole Miss football class, which is a high number compared to what it normally has been. Ole Miss makes its living off of the transfer portal right now. I don't know. At this point, that's not even a surprise. Ole Miss has decided to go all in on the portal, but they're also recruiting above the red line. As I always say, these players are good, and these players are a talent improvement. We need to recruit them because they're above it. This year was a good year in the state of Mississippi, and Lane Kiffin went after in-state kids. They did a pretty good job, honestly, and they've refreshed their defensive line. They've got a couple of O-line targets as well. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I expect players like Bryson Sanders and Preston Cushman to take a step on the interior. I think Jerquan Scott, he will end up as a utility offensive lineman, and we'll see exactly how it looks at tackle as well. But I'm pretty fired up about where this class and how we handled high school recruiting goes into the 2024 season and beyond. Anyway, I do want to thank everybody for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. There's still more to come. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The transfer portal is taking over recruiting, and now with the NCAA being sued over multiple time transfers, things could get weird. When hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you need to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. You know, hiring the right guy can have a measurable impact on your company. It's just like hiring the right college football coach. If you hire the right one, you're going to be in the conversation for the playoff, heck, potentially a national championship. If you hire the wrong guy, in 3 years, you're going to be doing it again. It's the same thing in real life, except the difference is it's not 3 years you're going to be doing it again. It might be 3 weeks. And everybody knows you don't have time to do this over and over and over again. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It's a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get qualified candidates within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Heck, they've even just launched a feature that helps you write these job descriptions that can make the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Be part of history. All right, so we talked about this being early signing day, and this is the biggest day of these kids' life, and you really need to do what you can to give them this day. That's one of the reasons we have avoided the transfer portal all today, and today is about the kids that are signing off for what is the best day of their life. But there is a storm brewing out in NCAA land that has a chance to diminish this early signing day and high school signing day in general to the nether regions of recruiting. Now, I'm not saying JUCO recruiting. I'm not going to knock it down to there. But you have a point where the NCAA is being sued over kids having to sit out for a multiple time transfer. And the courts are not going to rule towards the NCAA because they don't think that people should have to sit out. That doesn't happen in any other aspect of life. So why should it happen in sports? Because this isn't a job. You are not contracted. Freedom of movement needs to be an absolute thing. That is going to happen. The NCAA is not going to win a single case going in front of the court over freedom of movement and all of this stuff. Well, if that happens, you have a situation where the kids can transfer after their freshman year, after their sophomore year, after their junior year, and after their senior year. That leaves the high school as the least likable classification going into college. If you have 4 times after you sign them to where you can transfer, think about how much you have to recruit and how much you have to renegotiate over and over again. It is at the point where in the NCAA, the most desirable position will be the graduate transfer with 1 year in hand. And then it'll be seniors and juniors, then sophomores, and then freshmen, and then high school players. I mean, that's where it works. Maybe we might get to an area where JUCO players are more desirable than high school players because of the renegotiation that is going to be dealt with by everybody every single year. Now, it's at the point where Lane Kiffin talked about this for 3 years and nothing got done. And they're sitting there in front of Congress trying to get something done. And you know what? Nothing is going to get done. So Ole Miss is going to utilize this to the best of their ability. And they're doing that through the transfer portal because if you look 2 or 3 moves down the road, the least desirable person to get is a high school signee because of the renegotiations you're going to have to do and what they can do to leverage you over and over again and potentially drain your collective. Ole Miss is ahead of the ball here going after heavy in the transfer portal market. And whenever this starts, it gets to the point where the universities have to ask the question, do we need to make them employees? Whether contracted employees, the whole 9 yard, get out of the student athlete realm and into a discussion of a university employee. Get into that realm. I realize that people are not going to want to do that. But when you're talking revenue sharing, when you're talking all of this stuff right now inside the collective, as you can see right here, I am all about the Grove Collective. Love the Grove Collective. I think they're doing a fantastic job. They're potentially a top 5 collective in the country. That said, right now we have a model to where you keep asking fans to pay the salary for this college football team so you can be competitive and win games. Heartstrings and emotions, those are all part of it. But the university is kind of removed from that responsibility, even though they are getting tons of money. Eventually, that market is going to fail. That is a terrible market. This is a terrible idea. Right now, you got the heartstrings and the emotions to where you can make it happen. But it's not going to last forever. I think everybody realizes that it's not going to last forever. So we'll see what happens. It's to stop this every year transfer thing and the NIL situation. The answer is The players need to be employees of the university, 1099s, the whole 9 yards like that, to where they're outside of Title IX. This is going to be bad for Title IX, but it'll be better for the actual athletic universities and to handle these athletes that are making so much money as we speak. It's crazy, but the age of what college football was in 2017 or 2015 just doesn't exist anymore. The college football of 2017 might as well be the college football in 1962. Even the teams and the history and everything matters up until about 2018. And then after that, it all changed. And you look at what's going on with Ole Miss right now, they are kind of clearly the third best team in the SEC right now. Texas coming in will be interesting, but they are clearly the third best team over the last 3 years in the SEC. So it should be interesting indeed. Now, tomorrow, Zach Seiko, we're going to do another crossover with the Locked On Nittany Lions show to figure out what's new with Penn State, what's new with Ole Miss, and stuff like that. We'll continue to monitor transfer portals and things like that. We're going to live stream tonight. So if anything happens during the day, we'll talk about that as well. Obviously, we had a live stream last night as well. And as this is getting recorded, we're getting ready for signing day and all of that stuff. And we have the bowl extravaganza for next week where Michael Katz and David Eckert and Brad and Logan and those guys are going to come on the show and talk about the Peach Bowl. Should be a lot of fun indeed. And I'm looking forward to all of that happening. Remember, subscribe to the podcast. And if you haven't, please do. If you have, please tell a friend and get them to join the movement as well. And if we get to 6,000 before the Under Armour game, I'm planning on doing a remote broadcast and a remote show from the Under Armour practices. Not necessarily players or anything like that, but from the Under Armour practices, I'll do it. 6,000 unlocks remote shows. We're trying to get to 7,000, which kind of will unlock a call-in show potentially as well. So stay tuned for that as well. I said as well, way too much. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every dayers, we have all the Peach Bowl and all the recruiting talk you'll ever need. So check in all week for that. For your second listen, check out Locked On. They've launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering each and every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy.